All right. So first off, just to give everyone a brief overview of Collegewise and also myself, as a little bit more of an introduction, although Sarah did a really nice job giving some of the high points for me. Collegewise is the nation's largest college admissions company, college counseling company, and we do exactly what it sounds like. We have a few different departments, especially with academic services and tutoring and test prep and things like that. But our bread and butter and the thing that we've done since we were founded in 1999 is college counseling. And we meet people at all different stages of the process. And that's kind of the beauty of college counseling. Everyone kind of needs something a little bit different. We have very structured programs and plans that people can choose from, but we also are sensitive to the fact that people are going to want different things. And even though people are generally in the same situation, their specific situation is unique and different from somebody else's as well. So we meet people, like I said, at all different stages. Some will come to us freshman, sophomore year, not knowing anything at all, needing help with sourcing colleges, building a college list, figuring out where to go and visit particular campuses to finalize that list, and also getting pieces of their application complete and ready to roll, interview prep, anything. Sometimes people come and say, we know nothing about admissions and we want you to walk us through every single step of the way, which we're happy to do. We have other people who come in and say, hey, we feel like we have everything else under control except for the essay. We could really use somebody else's perspective to sit down and write essays, or have somebody brainstorm an essay with our student, have them write it, give them feedback, so on and so forth. We're happy to do that too. We also have people who come in and say, hey, we have a lot of questions and we just want to sit someone down for an hour and ask them a bunch of questions that we have to try and get as accurate information as we can. And we're happy to do that too. And like I said, we've been around since 1999. The Westport office specifically has been around for, I think, the past 7 or 8 years or so. And overall, as a company, we've had over 20,000 families come through and use our services over the years, and getting their students off to the best fit college for them. So we're really proud of that number, because obviously it's a lot of people that we've helped. For myself specifically, my journey towards joining Collegewise, which happened almost 4 years ago now, actually started when I was a senior at Sacred Heart. As many college seniors can probably attest to, as graduation was nearing, I didn't necessarily want to leave, didn't want to end my college experience because I had so much fun. And thankfully, even though I did graduate, which obviously is a necessary and good thing that I was able to do, I was able to come back pretty quickly after graduation to work in the admissions office at Sacred Heart specifically. So during that time, I had a few different responsibilities that had kind of morphed over the 3.5 to 4 years that I was there. The first responsibility, and really the main responsibility that I had, was recruiting incoming freshmen from a certain geographic area. So that certain area was first upstate New York, which they classified as a very large span of land. It was everything north and west of Westchester. And then as I grew into my position, I shifted down to just recruiting in Westchester County while overseeing all of New York State recruitment. In addition to that, as you can see on the slide here, I studied sport management while I was at Sacred Heart and also in graduate school. And one of the things that I wanted to get involved in was college athletics, because I thought it was just this idea of kind of marrying both things that I really enjoyed, sports and being on a college campus and enjoying that environment. So some of my secondary responsibilities at Sacred Heart included being the admissions liaison for the College of Business, which was a natural fit because that's where the sport management major was located in at Sacred Heart. And then also being the admissions liaison and spearheading a pre-read program for the Division I athletic sports department. So I worked a lot with all of our Division I coaches, helping them with their recruitment efforts, and also working with the compliance officer, making sure that the students who were getting recruited were also deemed as academic qualifier type students that would be able to come to campus and immediately start to participate in their specific sport once they become a student at Sacred Heart's campus. Also was the admissions liaison for the club sports athletic department too. For myself, my background in sports, always been involved in sports. I've spent the past 10 years or so being a sports writer in some kind of capacity as well. From an actual athlete standpoint, I played baseball all through high school and into college. I tried to get recruited, but for anyone who knows baseball, being a 5'8" first baseman didn't really go very well for me. But I did play club sports. I played club baseball at Sacred Heart, and it was a really good experience as well too. So I feel like with, I would say probably about half of my caseload or so each year has students who are either getting actively recruited by college coaches or who aspire to be recruited in some way, shape, or form as well too. So just to give you a quick overview of some of the things that we'll touch on, obviously we'll touch on these things in some broad strokes, and I'll try and incorporate how things have changed in, I want to say, post-COVID world, but obviously COVID is still very much a part of our everyday lives, unfortunately. So as we still deal with this pandemic and COVID and how it changes everything, try and kind of keep everything that we talk about, in that particular tense, just because it's something that we always have to consider, and it has changed the landscape, probably still for the foreseeable future as well too. But we'll talk about what types of recruits there are, and then also being able to have some realistic expectations, finding programs that fit a student's ability level, connecting with coaches, how student athletes can stand out from the rest of the potential recruit pool, other helpful tips and resources. And then, like I said before, we'll have time for questions at the end, but feel free to ask whatever questions come to mind when they come to mind, whether you unmute yourself or just throw it into the chat for Sarah to see it as well. So first off, there are mainly two different types of recruits that we will talk about in the athletic recruiting world. And as you can see, it's blue chip athletes and yellow chip athletes. Now, blue chip athletes are the ones that we hear about, especially for basketball and football, everything that's covered by 247 Sports, Rivals.com, ESPN.com, all those different types of places. They're the best of the best, the 4- and 5-star recruits that typically don't really have to do much of anything with regard to advocating for themselves to play at the next level. They've already been earmarked by a number of coaches or evaluators or whomever that they're the top of their graduating class, and they'll essentially have their pick of the litter with regard to the schools that they're going to want to that they may want to actually attend to play the sport of their choice at the next level. So essentially, you see that last bullet point, all they really have to do is just follow the rules and do what's asked of them and stay healthy and go to school and go to class and do their homework. And they're going to eventually get exactly what they want and and achieve that goal that they've been working for their whole life. We only hear about these types of athletic recruits, but this is obviously the small minority. We have thousands upon hundreds of thousands high school athletes each year that are playing in their particular sport. And the majority are the yellow chip athletes, which they are still good. And obviously they're good enough to play at the next level, but they're not at the top of their recruitment class in the nation. And the big difference is that with the blue chip athletes, they don't necessarily have to do much work to get in front of different college coaches that they may want to play for. The coaches are mostly coming to them. For yellow chip athletes, what typically they'll have to do is get a little bit of a marketing lesson on the fly and figure out, okay, how am I supposed to be advocating for myself? I want to play for certain programs or certain schools. I need to make sure that I'm getting myself in front of them in some way, shape, or form to be able to show them what I can do and get evaluated by them as well too. So I always wrestle with showing this type of table, especially at the beginning of this type of presentation, because I don't necessarily enjoy being a dream crusher, but I think it's also important to have some realistic expectations for those high school athletes who are trying to play at the next level, especially because when I was there, many, many moons ago, when I was a teenager, I didn't think about this stuff. So it's not going to necessarily, hopefully it's not going to necessarily change anyone's goals of trying to play at the next level, but it's just nice to be able to see, okay, lots of times with high school, you're really focused on regional competition, whether it be for us, Fairfield County, or just the state of Connecticut. And then you get kind of put into this bubble and you're just really engrossed in what's going on in Fairfield County and in Connecticut and things like that. You forget that there are 49 other states and the whole rest of the world that have people who are interested in these sports and playing in America at that next level as well too. So just to be able to see some of these percentages from high school to college, it's just again, just good information to see and be able to temper those expectations. So as you can see men's soccer, and these numbers are current as from a couple of years ago. Just about 500,000 high school athletes played men's soccer a couple of years ago, and only about 25,000 of them end up going on to play at the next level in college. So obviously less than 10% went from high school to college, and then the breakdown to D1, D2, and D3 is much smaller than that. And it's pretty much across the board. When we look at most of the major sports, it's a little bit higher for some of the more specialty sports, but I picked these just because they pretty much give you a pretty good cross section of what the numbers look like. So there is a lot of supply, or a lot of demand, and a ton more supply that's going on here. So that's why for a student who is not a blue chip athletic recruit, who is more of that in that yellow chip athletic recruit bucket, they can kind of just see, looking at these kind of numbers, obviously this has nothing to do with their athletic ability, but they just are able to see, okay, if I want to play at a certain level, outside of all the other things that we're going to talk about tonight, they need to also know, okay, like obviously there are a lot of people vying for these potential spots. Obviously not all of these high school athletes want to go play on in college, but a good number of them do. So it's just, again, drives the point home of making sure that they're marketing themselves appropriately, advocating for themselves for whatever it is exactly that they want to get out of playing at the next level. If they do want to play D1 or D2 or D3 or something else, they have to do some soul searching on their own to figure out, okay, what exactly is it that I want, and what is a good plan for me to follow to try and get myself to attaining that goal as well. All right, so obviously you take a look at all those numbers. It's probably a little scary. I know if I was 16, 17, or 18 and I saw those numbers, it would intimidate me a little bit, regardless of how good I was or was not. So how exactly do you know if you're competitive? So there are two different sides of the house, so to speak, for a student to figure out, okay, how will I have any idea if I'm going to be competitive for whatever it is I want to do at that next level. Everyone has different athletic and academic goals, but those are going to be the two sides of the house that we're going to be talking about right now. I would say the majority of the students that I work with each year would like to play at the highest level possible, but there are some students who pinpoint certain divisions of play because of for all various reasons, because of certain motivations that they have and what else do they want to accomplish in college and things like that. But for the sake of examples, let's just say you want to try and become a Division I baseball player. So the two different things that you need to think about are how much of a fit you are for certain schools from an academic standpoint and an athletic standpoint. And this is really the first place where I will tell students to go to figure out exactly how realistic their particular goals are. Because most of the time, especially when I work with students, I tell them all the time, I know sports a little bit. I don't evaluate high school athletes at all. I've never seen you play. And if I ever see you play, maybe it will be for one game if I go and watch you play, or it's a highlight video that you show me. And so I don't really know much of, too much to actually give you a fair assessment. But the first thing that I always want students to do is, especially from an athletic standpoint, find someone who can give you an objective opinion on your ability at this particular time in your life. So if you're a freshman, a sophomore, or a junior, and you go and find a coach or someone that's local that has worked with high school athletes, helping them get on to the next level and play their sport of choice, someone that you trust to be honest with you, have them evaluate you in all different aspects of your game, and sit down and talk to them about what you would like to accomplish at that next level. Say, I want to be a Division I baseball player. Do you feel like I'm on the right trajectory? What do I have to do to get there? So those are going to be the two different things you're going to talk about. Okay, after you get that evaluation, all right, this goal seems maybe a little bit out of reach, but if you want to give yourself the best possible shot to become attractive to Division I baseball coaches, here's the plan that I think we should put into place from an athletic standpoint to make sure that you're getting yourself up to that point by the time end of sophomore year, beginning of junior year comes around, when the athletic recruiting, especially for Division I, Division II programs, becomes a little bit more hot and heavy as well. There are a lot of things that are out of a student's control and a family's control when it comes to the athletic recruiting process. one of the things that I say is that it's very personal and impersonal at the same time, which is a really hard needle to thread for a lot of students, especially because they've never really had to get evaluated or judged in this way before, and they're teenagers. It's a lot of emotions that go through this process, and there's a lot of gray area, which is really difficult. So I typically will tell students that what's most important for this kind of process is to control all the things that you can control. So obviously, from an athletic standpoint, you can control how hard you work, how much you practice, and whatever plan that you're on. Make sure you stay on the straight and narrow to continue working towards your goals. But also, on the academic side of the house, you have complete control over the classes you take, the grades you earn, the test scores you get, and things of that nature. So, because for lots of these schools, obviously the prospective athletic recruits are student athletes, so they have to be students and they have to be athletes as well too. And there's only a small percentage that go on and play pro. So when we take a look at those percentages of students that went from high school to college, which was pretty low, it's much lower obviously for those who go from college to pros. So obviously the academics is going to be important, and being able to for a student to put themselves in the best possible position from an academic standpoint makes a coach's job that much easier to be able to advocate for you if they feel like you're a good fit for them from an athletic standpoint as well too. There are going to be certain cases where coaches are able to advocate for certain students, even if they feel like they're maybe a little bit below the admission standards of any particular university. But you need to put your best foot forward to be able to make their job as easy as possible, and also to show that you're serious about wanting to play at that next level too. So low grades, low test scores, not a lot of rigor in curriculums that in a curriculum that you feel like you can handle more, doesn't make it easier for them to be able to convince an admissions office that you are academically qualified to not only just be admitted to the school, but also be there for 4 or more years and graduate at the end of it all as well too. Sarah, is there any questions yet?
So far, no questions.
Okay, cool. So obviously, I alluded to it a little bit before, talking about the different levels. And I know when I was a teenager, and I know a lot of teenagers think this same way too, teenage athletes as well, that they want to be able to play for the best school at the highest competition that they can possibly get. That's not always the case, but I feel, especially for the students that I speak with and work with, the majority of the time, that's the answer that I get when I ask them, okay, well, what level would you want to play at? Division 1, 2, or 3, or something else? And they, typically they'll say, well, as high as I can get. As we go through working together, I make sure to have them do as much thoughtful research as possible, just because saying that you want to play Division 1 sports is great, but you also want to be able to know what that entails exactly. So outside of researching the school's athletic website, you also want to be able to visit the websites of the individual schools and specifically go to each school's sport-specific page. So if you're a baseball player, go to the baseball page. If you play basketball, go to the basketball page and check things out. Take a look. One of the things that I love to tell students to do that they haven't done yet usually is go check out what the roster looks like. Lots of times you'll be able to see, okay, where are they from? How big are they? What are they studying? And they have a little blurb about themselves. So you can kind of see, okay, where does this coach typically tend to recruit that have students actually enroll? So if it's a pretty regional school, you can see, okay, maybe I have a pretty good shot for this Northeast-based school. But if you're trying to go to a school in the South or out West, and it doesn't seem like they pull a lot of students from the Northeast specifically, then that's good information to have as you go about trying to advocate for yourself and getting yourself in front of this coach's staff to get evaluated and whatnot. It's also important to know exactly what the scholarship rules and rules and regulations are for each division, because they do vary slightly. As you can see, we have 4 here that we're going to talk about briefly. Division 1 and Division 2 are the most similar to one another, and then Division 3 is kind of its own beast, and then NAIA is something else entirely as well. So for Division 1 and Division 2, obviously Division 1 is the highest level of play. This is the most attractive one because this is typically the one that we hear the most. about when we're on social media, on the internet, and just looking at things, hearing about athletic recruits and people going on and playing at the next level, especially Division I football and basketball, because that seems to get the most airtime as well too. Lots of students don't realize how much of a time commitment it is to be able to play Division I sport. Obviously, you're in season, you have practice, you have games, but there really is no off season as well too. And that's really attractive to some people and not as attractive to some other people as well too, because they maybe want to do some other things in college as well, in addition to playing their sport of choice. So it can feel as if like it's some kind of part-time job. And I've seen a bunch of my friends and also just former students who have gone on to play at the Division I level, or working at Sacred Heart, seeing a bunch of people come and play Division I sports there. They really take to that structure and being able to have that year-round type schedule and always being involved in their sport because they really love it. And some people end up getting burnt out by it. So that's where some of this soul searching has to come into play for the student themselves, is to see, okay, I want to play at the highest level possible, but am I still going to like the sport by the time I'm done with it? By the time I graduate at whatever school I end up going to. Obviously, the number of scholarships will vary by sport, and they can be spread out between multiple players. So there are full scholarships, half scholarships, partial scholarships. It's really up to the coach with how they want to divvy up whatever budget they have. Division II is similar to Division I in the sense that there is athletic aid that is involved, but it's going to just be administered a little bit differently. Most of the time, there are some full scholarships that are available at certain schools and at certain programs, but it's very program specific as well. Most of the time, any scholarships given out at the Division II level are going to be what's called equivalency scholarships, which is essentially a fancy term to mean that there are partial scholarships that are given out, which makes sense for a lot of these schools. As obviously, as we go down the list from Division I to Division II, the budgets typically get a little bit smaller. Coaching staffs get a little bit smaller, so they try and stretch all the dollars that they have as much as possible to be able to field a competitive team each particular year as well. For Division III, obviously the biggest change between Division I and II and III is the sense that this is much more, I say here, much more for the love of the game, whereas the competition is more regional. There's a little less traveling that happens, and there is going to be a difference in scheduling because in Division III sports, you obviously are in season with practice and games, but you actually get an off season, as opposed to D1 and to a lesser degree D2, where you have some kind of structured program that you're dealing with on a year-round basis while you're in school and not in school as well. Also, from a financial aid standpoint, the greatest difference between D1 and 2 and 3 is the fact that there is no athletic aid that's given out at the Division III level. They find other ways to be able to award students with financial aid, whether it be institutional grants, merit-based scholarships that are technically based on academic achievement, and any other types of need-based financial aid as well too. So that is usually the greatest fundamental difference between D1 and 2 and D3 that mostly that students know, because they know that they can get athletic scholarships at the two higher divisions and not necessarily at the third division. NAIA level is not at all associated with the NCAA. It's a completely different governing body. It's been around for a long time. I'm trying to think of how long it's been around. I don't have it written down here, but I think it's been around for at least 70, 80 years, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's been a long time since this has been around too. You don't hear a lot about these schools. So lots of times students will take a look at these schools. I actually have a golf recruit right now who is really just the biggest thing that he wants to do in college is play golf. And he's spoken to a handful of Division I, Division II, and III schools, but also some NAIA schools as well. And I think it's interesting because he's still inspecting them just as much as the other ones, because they all have their own different types of opportunities that are available at those particular schools. As you can see here, over 90% of NAIA schools will offer some kind of scholarship. While they don't have a centralized database like the NCAA does, and they give out millions upon millions of athletic aid every single year. And they still have, I think it's 26 nationally sponsored sports with playoffs and championships and everything like that too. So It is essentially very similar to the NCAA, but without as much fanfare as well. It's probably the best way that I could describe it. So,
Matt, we have a question in the chat, if
okay.
you wouldn't mind. Okay. So the question is, can you get an athletic scholarship and also get financial aid?
Yes, that is possible. Yes. So it would be up to, because they're essentially, I mean, it's all technically financial aid, but it's in two different areas necessarily, I guess is the best way to put it. So if a student were to be awarded an athletic scholarship, that offer would come straight from the coach, essentially. So with whatever his or her budget is, underneath the athletics department umbrella. The other financial aid stuff, so if we're talking about D1 D2 schools, students are also eligible for merit-based scholarships based off of academic achievement, any other type of institutional-based aid or need-based aid that they have available. So it's not a one or the other type thing. If it is possible to put both together, depending on how the situation plays out and what that school is willing to offer, yes, absolutely. So it's not like, well, this person got offered a partial athletic scholarship, so we're not going to give them anything else. So if they're qualified for other things, they will also be awarded those things too. Was that it, Sarah? Is there anything else?
That was it. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So obviously, before we started, Sarah had smartly asked to just have people, if they're comfortable, dropping in the chat what age their student is that they're here listening for tonight. So this is a pretty common question that we get from families who are just starting this process, figuring out, okay, when exactly should we start contacting coaches? And obviously, there is a benefit to starting early for students who come in their underclassmen years and have already identified that this is something they potentially want to do. Just being able to cast that wide net as early as you can. It's a great thing to do. It's still all the same amount of work that anyone has to do, but just being able to do it a little bit earlier on, maybe with a little less stress, just being able to see, okay, which particular schools do I think I could be interested in, the types of level of play that I think I could eventually play, just to start to introduce yourself via email to coaches, put yourself into their recruitment database, sending copies of your schedule and when you're going to be at showcases and things like that. There's never a bad thing, but it's not as if you have to start freshman or sophomore year or you're not going to be able to play in college. Everything is, as you'll eventually find out, for those who haven't found out yet, the admissions game, especially the athletic recruitment game, is a very fluid process, and it's become much more fluid with COVID as a factor, because there are a lot of things that have changed, especially from an athletic recruitment standpoint. Whereas once the pandemic hit in 2020, spring athletes were given an extra year of eligibility, so that really impacted that next year's athletic recruitment class for lots of colleges, for students who actually decide to take them up on that offer and things like that. So the earlier you can start, that you realize you want to do this, the better. But it's not as if, depending on the program and the type of level that you want to play at, I've seen people who start initiating contact with coaches in the fall of senior year and end up getting to a program and playing that they're really happy with. Depending on the level of play that you're interested in the most, you also do want to be aware of NCAA rules and regulations and recruitment restrictions and things like that. There is when I speak to a lot of families and students and parents, they're always very nervous about the recruitment regulations and whatnot. And yes, there are things that are good to be mindful of, but most of the time, I always tell these families that it's not your responsibility to know how you're supposed to get recruited. So there's nothing wrong with you sending out an email and introducing yourself to a coach, or saying you're going to be on campus, or you're going to be at this showcase, or whatever it may be. You should feel free to advocate for yourself and market yourself in whatever way you want. Where the recruitment regulations and restrictions come into play is for the coaches and the colleges themselves. So you want to temper expectations, because there are some points in the year, especially if after junior year, where they're not allowed to initiate contact or respond to anybody, whether it be quiet periods or dead periods, or they can't talk to you in person yet because they're just following the particular protocol. That has nothing to do with you. You just kind of follow their lead because they're the ones that are following the rules. So just be mindful that there are going to be some times when you reach out and you don't get a response right away, or you don't get a response at all, and you have to reach out again, maybe. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't try, again, it's this where it's very personal and impersonal at the same time. Try not to take it personally, because there are either some reasons why there's always a reason why they're not going to be responding one way or the other, whether they just can't, or maybe it's just too early in their recruitment cycle to be able to do so, or another reason that they haven't said. So if you feel like it's a good fit for you, definitely try and reach out a couple of times, and just keep people in the loop, updated on what you're doing. And obviously, as you're doing this, make sure you're doing research on schools outside of your sport. Depending on the students that I work with, there are some that say, yeah, I'd love to play sports in college at the varsity level, but it's not the end all be all for me. I'd rather make sure that the school is a good fit and then see if XYZ sport fits into the school that I want to go to. But then there are other students who say, no, I definitely want to play volleyball or basketball or football at any particular school. So that's going to drive the bus for me when I do my research on that particular school, which makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do make sure that I remind students, hey, don't forget, things change a lot, especially in sports. Anyone who's a sports fan knows that things can change at the drop of a hat. Coaches leave, administrators leave, players transfer, so the dynamic changes. So my nightmare that sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat for some of the students that I'm working with is that they don't consider everything else that a school has to offer with regard to academics and other extracurriculars and the social fit and the environment and the area that they're in. Because if something happens, like one of those things that I just mentioned, or God forbid they get hurt or their personal situation changes and they're not able to participate in that sport anymore, I don't want them to look around campus and think, oh man, I only like this school because of the soccer program. And now that I can't do it the way that I want to, I actually don't like the school at all. So that's obviously not the optimal situation that we're looking for. So we want to make sure that students will, at the very least, outside of looking at the athletics program first, they consider everything else that a school has to offer, just so they know that, hypothetically speaking, if sports wasn't an option here, would I still actually like this school? Because that's an important question to ask, especially as you're going through the early stages of the research process as well. Okay, the importance of visiting. Thankfully, we've gotten to the point in the pandemic where people are visiting colleges again and doing so in a safe manner, which is great, because I've always viewed, whether you're applying to be a typical student or a student athlete in college, that visiting before you accept an enrollment offer is probably one of the most important things you could possibly do in the college process, because it allows you to put a name to the face. Everything can look great on the internet, but it's nice to be able to confirm all those great things that you see on the internet. For student athletes, they have a couple of different options that are available to them when it comes to visiting, which you can see in the first bullet point, which is official visits versus unofficial visits. So essentially, what an official visit is that it is a visit opportunity for a prospective recruit, where the athletics program will pay for that family to come and visit campus for a couple of days. The student will typically stay on campus with one of the current players in the dorms, and they will put up the family in a hotel room for the next couple of days of the weekend. And they'll let them go through, essentially shadow the upperclassman athlete to see what life would be like on that particular campus. It's a great opportunity. It's an invite-only type thing, so you can't ask a coach to have an official visit. They only have a certain number of official visit offers that they can hand out each year, and it typically comes in the fall of your junior year as well too. For when we're talking about the different divisions, for Division I and Division II, prospective student athletes can only go on 5 total official visits, and only 1 official visit per school. for Division III schools, you still can only go to one official visit per school, but there's no limit. You can go to as many official visits as you want for the Division III level as well. The main difference between official visit and unofficial visit is an unofficial visit is essentially you paying your way to get to campus. You driving to campus. If you want to stay for more than one night, you get your own hotel room, pay for your food and all that kind of stuff. It's essentially you going and visiting campus for a tour and information session, and maybe seeing the coach on campus if they're around as well too. So there is no limits on unofficial visits. So if you wanted to go back to the same school 10 times and do different admissions sponsored programs, whether it be shadowing a student for a day, tour and information session, open house, accept a student day, you can go as many times as you want. And there is no limit on whatever you'd like to do. So lots of times at Sacred Heart, we'd have students come for that one official visit, but they had been to campus 2, 3, 4 times because they just paid their way. They either drove there or flew there or whatever it was. They just got to campus on their own and did everything on their own and just saw coach while they were there. And then that was pretty much it. For students who actually are getting onto campus, make sure you check out all the aspects of the campus, not just the gym or the recreation center or whatever it may be. This is a great time to really get a sense of what life could be like on that campus if you were an enrolled student. And it's very easy to be able to do because lots of students will think, well, I'm in high school, so I look like a high schooler. And the only way that people on a college campus know that a high school junior or senior is a high school student is because you're on an admissions tour with your parents. So some of the things that I will suggest to students, although admittedly, I know that if I was suggested to do this when I was a 17-year-old, I probably wouldn't do it, but it is a good idea. Bring a backpack with you, do whatever tour you want to do and whatever you're there for, but after you're done, spend 10, 15, 20 minutes just with your backpack on, break away from your parents, just walk around campus for a little bit. Go into the bookstore, see what's going on, go into the cafeteria, get something to eat, sit down, see if you can just sit down and just chat somebody up. Ask some current students questions. And again, investigate more than just the athletics program, because being able to see what life is like, even though for that little small 20-minute snippet, you could really get an idea of, okay, if I was an actual student and it's just a regular Tuesday afternoon, this is what life would be like. Do I like it or do I not like it? Do I like being around the people that I'm around or do I not like it? And those are some important questions to ask that have nothing to do with the athletics program as well too. Okay, so I've talked about this a few times, especially with that table at the very beginning of the presentation about how there is huge supply and not a lot of demand with regard to high school athletes and college roster spots as well. So it's important to figure out how you can stand out from the crowd. And for people who are yellow chip athletic recruits, this is a really important part for them to not necessarily get perfectly right, but also just have a grasp of, just because they need to know the best opportunities and ways to get themselves in the best possible position to be evaluated, or at least have a conversation, get their foot in the door with a coach. There are a couple of different things that they can do. One is to have some kind of athletic resume readily available and ready to roll, with also an unofficial transcript as well, just because it allows a coach or a coaching staff to be able to see all of your basic information in a short period of time. All of your athletic achievements, maybe some quick stats, some contact information for your high school or club coaches, as well as your basic academic qualifications as well too. GPA, projected major of study, if you know, your course rigor, your SAT or ACT scores, if you've taken them at that particular point in time, or you're planning to take them, whatever that may be. It's nice to be able to have just a quick 1-page, 2-page resume with just all of the quick hits about who you are, as well as your unofficial transcripts. This way they can see how you've done in the classroom from 9th grade through whatever grade you're in at that particular point in time in life, and also be able to walk it over to the admissions office and see how you would stack up to the average applicant at that particular campus. In addition to that, I also recommend students put together some kind of highlight video to be able to show coaches exactly what they can do on the field or court or ice or in the pool, whatever it may be. It's important, especially now with COVID being a factor, obviously the recruitment and traveling restrictions have lifted a bit, but it still may be hard for coaches to get out and actually evaluate players in person, whether it be from a health perspective or a financial perspective from the college as well. Maybe they don't have a big traveling budget anymore, so they need to do things um, a little bit more by a shoestring budget and things of that nature. So um, so it'll be important to have some kind of highlight video put together. I would say no more than 4 or 5 minutes, and you want to be able to have a couple of different spots that are on there to show just straight up skill demonstration, and also game clips where you can be easily identified, so they can see you mastering it, showing your mastery of each of the skills that you show. And in a world where COVID is still a factor, it's great for them to be able to see at least something, because if you reach out, give your athletic resume, give your unofficial transcript, give some stats, all that stuff is great. But a coach isn't going to seriously start to consider recruiting you without at least seeing you play in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, they prefer to do that in person, but if they can't do that right away at a showcase or something like that, being able to see some highlights in 3 to 5 minutes is going to be really advantageous for them to start having that conversation with you as well. I talked before about when to reach out to coaches and having that introductory email to just send off to them. Sometimes, like I said, you may not get a response right away. So there's another way that you can actually get on their radar without actually having to have them respond to you. And that is to fill out the prospective student athlete questionnaire on each college's website. In some places, it's very easy to find for certain schools, and other times it's really hard to find in certain schools. But essentially what it is, it's all basic information about yourself. And it's pretty much your athletic resume in an online form that just goes straight into the recruitment database. So it automatically, once you fill it out and submit it, it goes right into their database, and you show up in the queries that they make, the searches that they do, for however they like to do their athletic recruitment and things of that nature. So it is a great option as one of the things that you can do to get on their radar, in addition to reaching out and introducing yourself and sending information about who you are, and also some highlights of yourself as well. Okay, eligibility. So this is important because I feel like a lot of students don't really know that this is a thing that they have to do right away. So what essentially this is, the NCAA Eligibility Center, this is where the compliance officer, when I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that I worked with the compliance officer at Sacred Heart, this is where they come into play, because they need to make sure that you are a certified, academically qualified amateur athlete to be able to play on their campus that upcoming fall. And that's what the Eligibility Center will do. So it is most important to do it it's actually mandatory to do it for Division I and Division II schools, because those schools have athletic aid that is attached to them as well, potential to get athletic aid. So if you're a Division III athlete, or you're undecided, it is good to do it still, just to kind of have all your information all in one spot, and to certify your academic qualifications, making sure you've taken all the core classes that you've needed to take up to that point to be an academic qualifier, and also certify your amateur status as well too. It's not as necessary for Division III though, just because there's no athletic aid that is attached to any potential offer that you would get from those particular schools. It is important to track everything, especially for someone who is a yellow chip recruit and trying to cast that wide net and make sure that they're trying to get in touch with as many coaches as possible to see if there's a particular fit for them in their particular programs. But too many times I've seen many students when I have check-in meetings with hopeful athletic recruits and say, all right, have you heard from anybody? I'm like, yeah, I heard from this coach, that coach, this coach. And oh yeah, I heard from this coach too, but I never respond to them because I forgot. So you want to make sure that whatever it is, and each student operates a different way from a tracking perspective. So I always suggest some kind of Excel document or Google Sheets document, just because you're able to make those tables how you want them to be, and you want to list all the different types of things that are most important to you. Whether it be name of the school, name of the coach, contact information, when you reached out initially, if you heard a response, when the last response was that you heard from them, or when the last time you two conversed, things like that. So it's really important to find some kind of tracking document, or some way to track everything, especially if you're trying to cast a net between 10, 20, 30 schools to see if there's anything that eventually becomes a fit. Because if you have that long of a list of schools, it's really tough to keep things straight in your mind. So you want to be able to at least have things down on either an actual piece of paper or a virtual piece of paper to make sure that all the information is in one spot, and it's kind of your holy grail of information. And you always know that you can come back and refer to whatever it is that you've created to make sure that everything is all straight. You have responded to everyone that needs a response, and you know exactly where you stand with certain schools as well. So okay, as if we didn't talk through enough tips and resources and things like that, here are a couple of final ones and some things that I've already mentioned throughout the presentation. One, don't take things personally. It's like I said, it's very personal because you're getting evaluated, and you feel like your worth is getting evaluated as being an athlete. So it's very personal and impersonal at the same time. So I've seen some students go through the process with lots of coaches, then all of a sudden they just kind of drop them like a bad habit because somebody else that they were recruiting accepted an offer that they gave them, so they didn't have any more room. So it's obviously frustrating, and nobody likes that kind of stuff, and nobody likes rejection for sure. But try and keep it as light as you can, and don't take it too personally, because I would rather you focus your energies on coaches that you think have a legitimate interest in you playing for them, as opposed to the ones who already said no or stopped responding or things like that. Don't forget, coaches don't award acceptances in most cases. For some D3 schools, some coaches are also admissions counselors, but for most, I would say 95% of the time, coaches do not award acceptances. So you still have to go through the admissions process, through the admissions office, submitting an application, putting your best foot forward, writing a thoughtful essay, all those kinds of things. Doing all those things makes the coach's job of advocating for you to get accepted that much easier as well too. Also very simple, just be nice. If you don't like not getting responses from coaches, make sure you respond to other people that are reaching out to you, even if it's for a school that you don't plan on pursuing at all. Just be nice, because that's the right thing to do, and you want to treat other people the way that you want to be treated as well too. Allow yourself to take a break. This can feel like a grind, especially whether we're talking about admissions itself or also athletic recruiting. There are going to be certain points in time where maybe you feel frustrated. You're not getting the kind of responses that you're hoping to get, or a showcase didn't go very well, and then you feel like you have to try a little bit harder on some other part of the athletic recruitment process. And you're always going to feel like you're behind too, whether we're talking about admissions or athletic recruiting. Make sure that if you're feeling a little burnt out, take a day or two off. Try and not think about it, which is admittedly probably really hard to do, but try to just take a break, because when you come back with a fresh mind, fresh eyes, things look a little bit different. You may be able to think a little bit clearer as well too. And last but not least, celebrate every positive step. If you send out a bunch of emails to coaches and you get some actual responses, celebrate that. If you go to a showcase and a couple of coaches pull you aside because they liked what they saw, celebrate that too. If you get an offer for an official visit or an offer to play for a certain coach, celebrate those things too. Like we said before, there's a lot of gray area that comes with this particular process. So as you get these small positive steps, I feel like athletes can appreciate and understand momentum more than anybody else. Use that momentum to your advantage and kind of hopefully have that snowball into other parts of the process as well too. Last but not least, here are some resources. I will put a form to fill out your information into the chat in a couple minutes. If you want to be able to get certain resources from us like these, or if you want to talk to a program advisor or something like that, just fill out the form. If you want to get a copy of the slides or just the copy of this particular this particular slide, I'm happy to send it your way as well too. So I'll throw that form and also my email address into the chat as well. So in case you want anything in particular, I'm happy to share any of the slides or anything that we've talked about tonight, any of these resources as well too. So all these things are super helpful. But obviously I know you can't click on this link because it's on my screen. So I will stop sharing my screen in a second and drop the form into the chat with my email. It's this way you can fill it out and ask me any questions that you have. But obviously now's the time where I'm done talking, obviously, unless somebody has a question for me. But if there are any questions, please feel free to either unmute yourself or throw them in the chat. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to watch me go through all this stuff tonight. And hopefully you feel a little bit more educated on the athletic recruitment process and how it relates to admissions a little bit more than you did when we started tonight about an hour ago.